Happy New Year, everybody. This is Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. Got a stack of all my books from Christmas to talk about today, and Memory Palace strategy for remembering more from all these books, and mnemonic examples that will be used, and anything you want to bring. So if you're joining us on the live stream, hit the thumbs up. Let me know in the chat where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. Say hello, be active. Let me know how your 2019 was and where you were in the world. Sorry, your 2018, and how the beginning of your 2019 was, and how your memory activities are going. And one of the books that I got here is Quid Pro Quo, What the Romans Really Gave the English Language. And excited to use the memory techniques in a memory palace to get some of this into memory. And one of the cool things about books that are about words is you learn a lot about language, its history, how it's changed, its origins, and it starts to focus you on the meaning of meaning, which is a very useful thing to meditate upon, especially when you think about it in terms of giant cultures that did so well and left so much for us. So again, if you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know you're actually engaged, that you're enjoying this, and say hello in the chat. Let me know where you are in the world. And another thing that I like to memorize a lot of is Sanskrit, of course. So I got the Mandukya Upanishad. I just got this, and apparently this word means, Mandukya means frog, and it's because our minds are constantly changing and leaping from frog, like leaf to leaf in the pond. So I got to put this into my memory here, Mandukya. So a mnemonic example for that, this is kind of cool, because if you have your cards together, or your major method 00 to 99, then you could think of, what you might have in numbers for man. So that would be 32, man. And so now I can already start to memorize this. Johnny Cash, he's the man in black for that particular card. And that's the two of diamonds. And so already that will be into memory. Now Duke, Mandukya, if we think of John Wayne, he was the Duke. And this yeah thing, maybe it's a Russian John Wayne who's saying yeah, or a German not saying I, but a German saying yes. In any case, options. But you start to put that into a memory palace, and you'll be able to remember it. So Subha says hello. Good to see you here. Thanks for saying hello. If you're joining us, hit that thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. Guitar Zero, The Science of Learning to be Musical. Got to remember lots of the stuff from this book as well. And what's really cool, Gary Marcus, I read another book of his called Cluj back when I was in my graduate school years, and that was about the brain and evolution, and so really excited to see what happens when he gets into guitar work. And then I got this book, which is memory palace related, called Songlines by Bruce Chatwin, I think is his name. Yeah, Bruce Chatwin. And this connects obviously to Lynn Kelly's The Memory Code, because she talks about songlines in there. So I knew I had to get it, and apparently it's a bit of a Australian classic, so I'm looking forward to that. And basically the strategy, before reading any book is quite simple. Look through the amount of information that might be there. So, pre-reading is really, really important. This book in particular doesn't say chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So my goodness, I'll have to get into the labor-intensive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So there's 15 chapters if you include the epilogue. And then consider making 15 memory palaces. So this is just super easy to read through it and bang, 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 bang. And always limiting how much one memorizes is a better decision than just trying to have it all, memorizing a million things per page. It's always better to put a less is more policy and just laser in, focus in on what would be the most relevant, useful, powerful, profound information there. So that's really my strategy for pounding through these books. I've got another couple of books also. Gifts of the Crow by John Martzloff, which is really great for looking at the brains of crows and thinking about how they relate to the brains of humans and some of the things about dopamine and opioids. And a lot of people think that dopamine is involved in the production of feeling good, which it might be, but it really is more about learning and memory and focus and concentration. And then the opioids come, from what I'm reading and understanding, come from the rewards, or you get rewarded with the opioids from certain accomplishments and so forth. So really interested in a lot of this neuroscience and getting better about it. And Gifts of the Crow by John Martzloff is something I recommend. And how I remembered that is I thought of my friend John in Berlin, and him with a Mars bar riding on the wing of a Lufthansa airplane. Mars, Luft, right? So if memory serves, I don't have the book here to look at it, but I'm pretty sure that's what the guy's name is, so it should have worked. So Acro is here, says, "Hi Anthony, it's Shane. I appreciate your feedback and emails this week. I'm off work next 3 days and look forward to your multiple training sessions." Excellent, Shane. Thank you so much for your email or your text here, and glad you're looking forward to the memory training. Awesome. Chicken with wine, everything will be fine. It says, hello, chicken with wine, everything will be fine. I love that. And yeah, Shane, that's great when you have the days off. When people take the master class, I recommend just nailing it down. Don't spread it over a million weeks. If just the same thing, like over in December, I took a massive course, and it just doesn't work to spread it out over too many days. You just got to buckle down. You got to get the big picture overview. And I took a couple courses actually over the holidays, and it's just really, really helpful to be a bit brute force about it and just get it done. And then you go back in and do granular revisitation over time. So that's really, really important. Oh wow, so people are arriving. Gustavo is here from Argentina. Hello, Gustavo. And Acro agrees. Knock it out. Awesome. Will do. Kyle is here. Happy New Year, Anthony. What is your opinion on listening to music while studying? Hey, that's a good question. Let me finish your question, but that's a great one. Any recommendations for creating stations? It takes me a long time to create imaginative stations. All right, Kyle, great questions. Let's dive into that. And if you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world in the chat, and where you're at with your memory palaces and any questions you might have. So, first of all, listening to music while studying. It's interesting you're asking this, Kyle, because I might be doing a larger post about this, because it occurred to me that when I'm studying things, music only works if I know the album inside and out. So when I can't focus and concentrate and I'm listening to something, it's usually because it's new music. And so I'm having to really deal with this new influx of information. But if it's an album that I've heard 50 times, 1,000 times, whatever it might be, then it's just no problem. And this might have to do with something in the brain called the reticular activating system. I don't know. I don't have the budget to run the experiments, but it might be, because the reticular activating system is apparently the thing that, when you're sitting and you're reading or whatever, and all of a sudden you notice that the fridge goes off or a fan goes off, but you didn't notice it the entire time it was on. It wasn't impeding on your attention at all. Well, apparently that's the reticular activating system in the brain that is filtering it out, even though it is existing in your brain. So I think that principle applies to reading or studying while listening to music. Now, let's take it to the next step, because I've written many, many books, and I'm getting near finished the new book now. Every day at the library, bang, 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 bang. And it's really great. And sometimes I do listen to music while I'm writing it, but other times not. But the trick is to always listen to the same music. So many of my other books, for years and years and years, I listened to the same album over and over and over again while writing. Pretty much every blog post, same album while writing. And it just supports the focus, but never takes away from the focus. Put on a new album and that I've never heard before, can't really write the same. Likewise, I can't edit while I'm listening to that album, but I have this other album that I can listen to while I'm editing, and it's no problem. So interesting question. Now, in terms of creating stations, I'm a bit confused by your question, because you don't have to be creative about stations. That's against the whole point. It just needs to be stations that are absolutely no-brainer stations. You don't want to have to think about them at all. You don't want to have to create them at all. They should just be there. And how do you get them there? Well, draw your memory palaces. Draw your memory palaces in a proper memory journal. So I just was writing a drawing a memory palace today, right? And there's some other ones previous in my journal here. Anyway, it doesn't matter where they are. But draw them. It doesn't matter how complex or simple. And here I was thinking, yeah, I remember maybe the teacher's desk was somewhere, but I just focused on where I remember the biggest structure there. To not get creative, not get fancy, not do a bunch of work, just the simplest, most focused, not have to think about it stations in the world. That's how you get speed. That's how you move towards a greater magnetic effect. So let me just review here, see if there was more nuances to your question. Yeah, and you know, in terms of it taking you a long time to create imaginative stations, if you take away the imaginative part, because that's not what the goal is, then that should speed everything up. And then just practicing should increase the speed. And continuing to mine your life for memory palaces should do. Hugh is here from Vietnam. Hello, Hugh. Great to meet you. Wonderful, wonderful. If you're joining us, thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world. Gustavo asks, would you recommend handwritten summaries over computer type ones? Which one is better to memorize? My handwriting is kind of messy, and I feel that typed summaries are more organized. Well, ultimately, it's up to you. You have to see what works best. I would just maybe do a hybrid of the two. Do it sometimes in handwriting, sometimes in typing. See what's actually working better for you. Or do a little bit of both. Look, one of the things that is a pain that I have to pay to be just better at memory is that I will often make lots and lots of notes in my memory journal that I have to type up later. It would have, on the one hand, been easier to just type, but the problem is that I just don't have nearly as good material come out unless it's handwritten. Now, my handwriting is also a bit sloppy, but I've worked on penmanship. Penmanship training, some people say, I haven't seen any of the science on it, but it just makes sense that penmanship training would be better for your focus and concentration, because anything that you're focusing on and concentrating on is going to improve certain things. Whether it's going to improve memory or not, I mean, just got to experiment with it. But I have found in my life something very good is that every minute you spend on penmanship pays off in big ways. And one of the ways I'm working on penmanship now is with my mind mapping. And so I know this is mirrored in reverse. Sorry about that. Apple, iTunes, YouTube, whatever. Why is your camera here? You're mirrored. I don't know. But I've been working a lot on the penmanship and slowing down and not being so sloppy on my mind maps. And it's great. It helps. So every minute spent on penmanship is just good, period. And also, I would just say not worrying about it too much, not being too sloppy, or not being too precious about it, because there's my other memory palaces I was looking for. Like, I just, the worst thing that happens from being a little bit sloppy is I'm just like, what was it I was writing there? And then I figure it out, you know, because I know the context and the content, so not much to be gained. But generally, I do try to work on my penmanship, focus on it, and great question. So it's worth considering, and just I would split test. But I'll say the things that I really remember the best, even from university, is when I did both. So the first professor, I had two professors in my graduate school years who required summaries, and the first one was Katie Anderson, and I remember way more from that because I wrote out by hand what it was that I learned from the writing, and then I had to type it to submit to her, because there were scanners back then, but it was a real pain to scan handwriting, and she probably wouldn't have accepted it anyway. It had to be typed. But then the second professor during my directed readings in graduate school, I just typed it, and I don't really remember nearly as much, but you just have to see for yourself. It was also a lower volume of writing for the second professor, a lower volume of reading. But in any case, try for yourself, see what happens. Maricella is here. Awesome to see you, Maricella. Always great. Maricella is doing great stuff in the masterclass. Enjoyed lots of your drawings and images that you share in the mastermind group. Chicken with wine, everything will be fine, says, I'm a teacher in coaching, and I follow your memory techniques in class. Oh, awesome. Great. Sophia's here. Hello, Sophia. Thanks for saying hello. Thank you so much for your kind words the other day. I really appreciate that. Aiden's asked me, do I know Nick Gears? Nick Gears? No, the name does not come to mind. Let me know who that is. Should I know that person? Gustavo says, thank you. I'll try penmanship and do both. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about penmanship, because in the ways that I've focused on it, there's just normal penmanship, focusing on that. And then there's writing backwards. So I spent lots and lots of time over probably about a year and a half just writing backwards all the time. I never did any mirror writing, but I found that writing from right to left was a great way to focus and concentrate. And then I also did it with my non-dominant hand. So I'm pretty much dual-handed, but writing is my weakest dual-handed skill, except for on chalkboards. For some reason on chalkboards, and I'm not even sure if this is true anymore because I haven't done it for a number of years, but when I was a lecturer at university, I used to just take the chalk and hand it to the other hand, and it was actually my non-dominant hand seemed to be better to me in writing on the board, but on a flat surface on paper, it was not as good. But I worked on it both, and I wrote forward and backwards in both hands, and using the non-dominant hand, writing backwards and forwards, really focuses you on what it is that you're writing. And so that I would recommend to play around with and experiment with. Now, why would that be worth your time? Well, one thing is that you're increasing your focus and your concentration. You're using, 160 plus different muscles that connect with parts of your brain that are probably lying dormant, not doing anything. And so you're stretching and so forth, but you're getting more focus and concentration from more parts of the brain. I don't know this to be 100% the case, but it just seems logical based on brain science and all that stuff. So see if you get an effect. The thing is, and the problem with these things, or the benefit with these things, when you do these experiments, is if you just do it once, you're never going to feel it. If you do it twice, you're still probably never going to feel it. But do it over 90 days, and then you'll just wake up one day and you'll just go, oh my goodness, oh. And this 90-day thing, I learned in Richard Weissman's 59 Seconds, which is a highly interesting book I recommend everybody read, because it goes into the origin of this idea that you can form a new habit within 29 days, and it shares more of the research on that, which boils down to essentially 3 months. And even then, it's not guaranteed to be a lifelong habit, but it's well worth keeping that in mind when you do things. So it's very important, and I think it's very important for memory training as well. So Kyle says, thanks for answering my question. No problem, Kyle. Is there a reason you don't teach speed reading if you know it works? I saw your friends with the Super Learner program. Harvinder's here. Hi, Harvinder. Good to see you. All right, so is there a reason I don't teach speed reading? Well, here's the little secret. I do teach speed reading, but I just teach a different kind of speed reading that I call slow reading as a joke. And the reason why is because the best of speed reading techniques cause you to slow down and really consider the nature of the information. I actually just demonstrated something of that technique today when I looked at Guitar Zero here. And when you slow it down and you understand what are called the paratexts of a book, you prime your mind, you prime your memory, and you're much more likely to remember more things because they're going to pop out at you as being important. Because paratexts tell you what the text is all about in ways that we often just ignore. We ignore, and it's very, very sad. Gerard Genet wrote a whole book called Paratexts, all about just how much information is included in this. It's not a speed reading book, it's a book of essentially French literary theory or literary criticism or whatever, but it's one of the best books I ever read. And I learned so much, and it helped me a lot in my academic work to understand paratexts, and they show up all over the place. So that's one thing. But I don't call it speed reading, and the reason why is because I don't teach any of the stuff about, muscles in your eyes or any of that. And I personally don't want to train to do that because I like reading just fine as I read. And so the strategy in the masterclass takes what I have found to be the best from speed reading that does not require any of the 90 days at least of eyeball training you're going to have to do, that at the end of the day, even if it quote unquote works, I can't see the benefit of what that outcome would be because of the nature of my own personal relationship to language, and I suspect the relationship to language that other people actually want. And so speed reading has a place, it has a context, and I don't question too much, although I have in the past, the reports that people give of it, and there's certainly documented cases that are fine. I just don't want to pay the debt of it, and I just, like the debt of training for that outcome and that relationship to information, I just don't want. And I don't think that it is really what will get people who want to learn languages, for example, have memory techniques for language learning, for deep, connected webs of philosophical thought, who want to be critical thinkers. You're not going to, if you're speed reading, you're likely not going to have the depth of thinking that comes out of that. But I know that it is for other topics, and certainly there are skimming techniques that I myself use as well, but I just don't call it speed reading, and I don't make any claims about anything other than what actually happens. And so skimming is skimming if you're skimming. And some people, they hypnotize themselves into thinking that they've put enough practice into the speed reading techniques and that they are speed reading when they're still actually just skimming. And there's nothing wrong with skimming. It's just don't call a spade a spade. Don't call something other than what it is. And so that's the big thing. But in terms of what Jonathan teaches, was like, I've sat with Jonathan many times in my life, and I've watched him, and I've seen that he's producing this summary of what he's just read under duress, and it's just quite clear to me that this is a going thing. But he's very honest about it too. Like, it makes him tired, and it took him practice, and that he uses it selectively. So it's not just some magic bullet. So that's basically what I have to say about that. And the extent to which one then percolates and understands what one has read, well, Jonathan has another great concept, which is brute force learning. And so it basically comes down to something, I use a much less sexy term, which is narrative accretion. So every topic has a narrative, and you can't really get the granular details of anything if you don't have the bird's eye view, if you don't have an overview. So you need both, and that's what we said earlier in response to Shane. I believe it was Shane. Let me look through the chat here. I always like to test my memory. Yes, Shane. And we were talking there about how I had to take courses. I took a couple of courses over the holiday season there, and I just buckled down and took the whole courses to get the overview, then go back and get the granular detail. It's really, really important. And so that's essentially what Jonathan is talking about with brute force learning. So here's the thing about learning. It never comes down to just one skill. It comes down to a well-oiled engine of multiple pistons firing in unison, and you can train them all together, but you have to know what they are, and you just have to practice. And so I never wanted to practice speed reading, even though I've taken several courses on it, and I've just taken the best stuff that seemed the most practical, that would get me the furthest, the fastest, and just focused on memory. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how fast you can read anything if you don't remember it and you don't turn it into thought, if you don't turn it into knowledge through practice. And that's it. That's my speech on speed reading. So Amsal is here. Hello, Amsal. Thanks for saying hello. Hit the thumbs up if you're just joining us. Let me know where in the world you are. And Gustavo says, wow, great insight on that. I have Weissman's book in PDF and never got the time to read it, but I'll get to it ASAP. Yeah, read Weissman. Weissman has many great books. He's quite an astonishing guy. I haven't read all of them, but my other favorite book of his is called The Luck Factor. So that is something I would also read. And Quirkology is just really interesting, and his YouTube channel is fantastic also. Hoy says, how do I make new rooms in my mind to put information into? I used all rooms I know and watched some on the internet, but it's not enough for huge information I have to remember. Great. Well, here's the thing. You don't make them. They pre-exist. They're in your memory. And if you haven't taken the free course, go to magneticmarymethod.com/YT or just to the site. Sign up for it, and it'll show you how to do this. Because you don't want to be making anything. You want to be using what's already in your mind. And the making part comes from the strategic process of ensuring that you know it as well as possible. So try to avoid making anything, but rather discovering and exploring. And it's the same thing with mind mapping in many cases. So I didn't make any of this as such. I just used mind mapping to find my ideas. And they just, as you can see, they just pour it out of my head. And that's not the only mind map. There's another one, and so on. And it's just really, really great how that these techniques, they reduce invention and maximize creation and finding and discovery. Amsal says, if I have a little long information on my index card, should I convert that info into one station, or info should not be long on the index card? I'd have to really know more about the nature of that information, Amsal. And one way to get more involved and share your information is in the mastermind group. So if you're able to join that, then you can post what you're working on there and we can look at it. But in general, what you've got on your cards there, it's not, it's up to each individual person to figure out how they're going to use the memory techniques and how they're going to laser in on the specific information and what they're going to encode, what magnetic images they're going to make, where they're going to go into the memory palaces, and how that's going to become an efficient practice for you based on what it is that you want to memorize and how important it is to memorize, and then your practice. So if we had an index card that, and this is not an index card, but let's just say it is, and it was just like loaded with information, then I have to say to myself, is this really realistic to memorize? Then I have to say, well, I do have to memorize all of it. Then I have to say, okay, how many stations is this going to be? And in the Sanskrit that I'm memorizing here, all of this is in my head now. It's just not even Steven across the board. Some things should just require one station, should, dangerous number, but just because it technically should doesn't mean that it will. Other things I'm able to reduce down, just look at half a line there or whatever, and just I don't even have to memorize it because it contains a number of words that I already know, and then I go, oh, and it's just fine. And other times I might already know the words and I still have to encode them again anyway. So it's really something where the real practice here is kind of like judo, or systema, the Russian martial art, where everything is dealt with as it comes because you've strategized yourself and you're prepared in advance to execute the perfect move without having to think too much about the perfect move in that time. So you always have memory palaces prepared in advance. That's just like having your sword, your samurai sword, in your belt. There's no excuses. You're not a samurai if you don't have your samurai sword. Just you don't get to call yourself the samurai if you don't have that. And then you go and you have your memory palaces there, and you look at the information. You don't worry about the memory palace running out because you got multiple memory palaces. You don't worry about not having enough stations because you know that you got enough memory palaces. You have an abundance mindset about your memory and the memory palace technique for your memory. And you have an abundance mindset about all the magnetic imagery that you would need. And you just go into the practice. And then if you run out, you go into the next memory palace. And you use your memory palaces correctly, which is to use recall rehearsal and get the information into long-term memory. So, hope that answers your question there. Ash Wamada, hello. How do I store important chapters in memory palaces? That's a great question. Let me know first how many memory palaces you have, and then we'll go from there. Amsel says, thank you very much. Quite well explained. You're welcome, Amsel. Kyle says, sorry for asking so many questions. Don't apologize. That's what we're here for. We're hanging out. And if you're joining us, hit the thumbs up if you haven't said hello yet. Tap, type, whatever it is in the chat. Do you have advice for beginners? I'm hesitant and I'm doing the masterclass slowly because perfect practice makes perfect, so I always doubt myself currently. Great question, Kyle. Well, the first thing is that I don't know that perfect practice actually is possible, so don't try to be perfect. What matters, the fundamentals that matter here, is that your memory palaces are well formed using all the magnetic modes, that your magnetic imagery is well formed using the magnetic modes, and that the information that you memorize is going to actually create a win. So if you have the masterclass, then you know you have all the training on the ins and outs of all this. But the real key difference for most people is that they actually dive in and create the memory palaces. And as quickly as possible, they use them to memorize information that actually makes a difference. And that's the key thing. You know, someone just joined the mastermind, and he's just going great with Spanish vocabulary. I think he said today in his post 14 new Spanish vocabulary words, and he did his recall, and 3 were missing. That's a huge rate of success from someone who's a beginner, and a part of it is the interest in the actual information. And so what ends up happening is why I always say memorize the information that improves your life. I press upon that because you need to have the creation of these chemicals that are rewards for the activity. And so that's why you need to do it as quickly as possible and not overthink it and not try to be perfect, because perfectionism is a killer. Progressionism towards continual improvement, and improvement can mean many different things, is the name of the game. So, you know, I just don't, in my own practice, ever worry about perfect. And I always have a beginner mindset. Every new line is a new thing. So there's just this line in the Sanskrit that I'm memorizing, Jyotiha, or Yotiha, and I don't quite, know if I got it yet and so forth. And it's just a new word in Sanskrit that I never knew, and I got to now deal with it as a new thing. And just that beginner flavor of excitement, and then you get it and you're like, yeah, right? And just all these words, Nishitam and samsara and all these wonderful things, it just feels so good. And it's because it's meaningful to me. It might be the least interesting thing for you, so don't memorize that if that's not interesting to you. Even this new book, what was it called? Manduka, because we said that I didn't know it at the beginning very well. And now, yeah, sorry, it's backwards here for you, but Mandukya. It's just a win because I want to know this stuff and memorize it. So always focus on information that improves your life. And that's why I always, I do it half joking, but with dead seriousness. These books that talk about memorizing shopping lists and random words like chicken and pencil, and like there's no win there. You just get a novelty effect. Oh, I remembered these words correctly, which a lot of people, they don't even do the exercise because there's no reason why to memorize a list of random words. But if you just zero in on the words that make a difference, that matter to you, bang, you're going to get these chemicals, dopamine, and because you're doing it consistently, you get myelin, which is so important in the formation of the habit. And when you get these rewards through the opioids, you just feel really, really good, and you're encouraged to go on and on and on and on. So that's why I like to have the beginner mindset, because I never get tired of the great feeling of, oh my goodness, I actually called that back. I recalled it. And it's amazing. And when you get really into this and turn it into a skill for life, Sunil was just posting his thing too, and I think he said 300 kanji he memorized, new kanji, and 5 of them he didn't get back. So that's 295 kanji. Oh, and he took a 2.5 week break or something. What is it, a 1.5 week? I didn't memorize the exact specifics there, but that's a huge rate of recall. And it comes from the depth of practice with the techniques and pairing that with information that improves his life, because he has goals with Japanese. And before that, Sunil has been part of the Magnetic Mary Method family from almost the very beginning, and he just knocked it out of the park with Korean before that. And so as you practice, the more that you practice, you're developing deep, deep skill with it. And so you get to have those things and just have an amazing adventure that constantly surprises yourself and rewards your brain. So keep that in mind as you practice. Hope that answers your question, and thank you, Kyle, for being part of our community. And please reconsider being hesitant. It will probably slow you down more than just yeah, I'm in this, and dive in and keep paddling, because we learn to swim by being in the water. We can read all the manuals that we want, but we should read the manuals as quickly as possible, get the big picture, dive in and do as quickly as possible. And likewise with swimming or driving, you can read that driving manual forever, but if you don't get in the car and drive, you will never be able to take the exam. And that's just the way that is. So set aside time to get the course done and dive in and create the memory palaces and use them with information that matters. Amsal says, suppose if throughout the book events happened during 50,000 and 30,000 BC, so in major method should I keep one image only? I'm not sure what that question means, Amsal, but try and rephrase it with an example. But generally, I'd have to actually look at how the actual book is structured. But if you're using the major to memorize those numbers, certainly you can devote a memory palace station or an entire memory palace just for the numerical aspects of a book. So let me see here. 4 to 8 and 3, 4, 8 I think was what it was. Well, yeah, that's what it was. 4. I'll have to look that up. Doing a little memory test here. Ran. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, generally what you want to do is just use the major and encode the stuff strategically based on your practice. I don't know. It's hard for me to speculate if you don't show me the exact examples. And so the way to do that is to be in the masterclass, and I hope that you will be. Trying to think out loud here. Let me know if you have any questions if you're just joining us, and if you have any questions and you've been with us for a while, let me know. Hit the thumbs up, and I'm just gonna get back what I had here, and it was the mayor, so it's got to be right. Was it the mayor? 428 into 3. Huh. I'm gonna have to look that up. In any case, that's all I wanted to do today, to hang out with you all. Let's see, Amsal says, actually for 50,000 I've created one image, so should that image be throughout the book, or every time I come across 50,000 I should convert it into an image? Really, Amsal, I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but should questions almost always go back to give your instinct a try. If you're not in a position to be in our group and share your examples and ask questions with specifics, but there's no mistaking. There's no mistake to be made by just giving your instincts a try, and then if they're not working, coming back to study the techniques more. But I don't know the nature of the book, and so it's very difficult to it's very difficult for me to speculate on information I'm not looking at. If that makes sense, and I hope it does. All right, so let me know if you have any more questions, and I'm just looking something up here. Maybe I'll do a little bit of mailbag. All right, look at that. They work. This is going to be backwards, but 428 and 348. So I was just going in my mind here the dates of Plato, and I was thinking, oh, that would suck if I got those wrong. But there they are, born 428 and died 348. So that's how it works. And so to answer your question, Amsal, if I was reading a book, I would just use the major there to encode it and get it memorized into long-term memory and not mess around with it as long as possible. And apparently it did get into long-term memory, because I only memorized the dates of Plato for a previous live stream. I shared what those images were and how that worked. And now it's a couple weeks later, and there they are. I remembered them, and these are at least the dates on the same Wikipedia page that I looked at before. Victory! I love that. And there's no particular reason why that I should remember the dates of Plato for all time, but it'd be kind of cool to have that in there. And it's obviously very possible. And the thing is by actually recalling here, by doing this manual thing, actually I started here and I was like, oh no, I think I got it wrong. But then I went with my original guess, and there it is. The benefit of doing that, not looking and actually writing it out, is because call to mind first, then write, then confirm. And that actually helps you develop more memory reserve around the topic than ever before. So it should theoretically come even faster next time with greater certainty. But the beauty of certainty is that you just don't need a certainty if you have the proper techniques in place. So let's see if we have any more questions here. Okay, Kyle says, I was watching your number masterclass and practiced the random name exercise. Number 8, I rhymed with rake, and the name was Veronica Labrowska. I don't know a Veronica or Labrowska, so I got stuck. Okay. I would just use these as exercises, Kyle, and then move on to the next. They're meant to just start to developing some skills, and if you want to start to know a Veronica, for example, like you can put into Google famous Veronicas, and I wouldn't worry so much about the last names. Like some of these are really challenges for stretching, but they're not necessarily names you would ever encounter. But you could think of the star sign for Libra, for example, and you can think of Oscar the Grouch, and you can think of Washington State somehow for Librausqua. And Veronica, maybe it's a generational thing, but I think of Archie comics. I can't think of a Veronica I know either. But it's just, the game is to find solutions and to stretch yourself. And so if you just keep moving forward and then come back to anything that challenges you, do a little bit of research, maybe see some images, then you'll be able to have the best of both worlds. But don't let the things that are too challenging knock you down. So there's something called the challenge frustration curve, which is that as long as you keep yourself challenged, you will grow. But if you frustrate yourself, then you're going to want to slow down or quit. So when you get frustrated, just slow back down to challenge and then go up. So if rhyming 8 becomes a challenge, then go to 9, right? Or if rhyming Veronica becomes a challenge, go to the next name, and then you might come back and say, oh, Veronica harmonica. Not exactly close enough, but good enough, and it'll work. So that's what I would suggest for that. And let me know if you have more questions on that. And William is here. Good to see you, William. Wow, I haven't seen you for a while. In Kunming, China. Forgive the out-of-context question. When can we expect the Chinese language book? Well, I really don't know. I've got many projects on the go. I want to translate the Matteo Ricci book, so that will connect to Chinese, but I think that will come before the Chinese book. And I feel that all the things that would be in that book are covered in the masterclass currently. Aries says, hello Aries, good to see you. We're going to call it a day here in about 5 to 10 minutes after a brief bit of mailbag. If you have any last questions, grab me now, and if not, we'll see you on the next time. Maricela says, how do you organize mail, papers, and books overall when you travel or moving to other places? How do I organize mail when I travel to other places? You mean in my memory or in my life? How do I... I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but in general, whenever I move overseas, well, not whenever, but the majority of the times that I've moved over, no, I guess it's half and half. I've shipped everything, and then other times I just got rid of everything and literally went with a backpack. And I prefer the only go with a backpack. Get rid of everything, go with a backpack. In terms of managing mail, you just tell everybody that your mail address has changed. And I guess I have in the past had it redirected to family. But I got rid of, like, for example, when I went from Berlin back home to Vancouver, I shipped everything because I had all my academic books still from my PhD, and I had done a lot of studies in film research and was a film professor, and shipped all that stuff back to Canada with the best intention in mind that I would find some way of continuing to be a film professor in Canada. And I hadn't really wanted to go back to Canada, but the circumstances just went that way. And when things in Canada didn't quite work out, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was starting to do my memory stuff. And I mean, I'd already done memory techniques for years, and just circumstances kind of had me writing about memory techniques or teaching them to these kids, and they asked me to write it all down, and that was the origin of the first book that I wrote. And then it just happened that a band that I'd played in while I lived in Germany said, hey, when are you coming back to take your throne? That's the way they put it. And I was just like looking at the progress with the way my book was going, and I just thought, well, heck, I can be there right away. And so I just got rid of everything. So I don't know exactly how many books it was, but it was probably around 2,000 books and around 500 movies, and probably a similar number of CDs, music. And I have a picture of what I took on the plane, which was just my bass, because I needed to go on tour with the band, and my backpack, which had my laptop in it, and my suitcase. And the only thing I shipped was my memory journals in a box, and I just had them out the other day. I was looking through them, and I shipped my magic case, because who knew what was going to happen when I got to Germany with no job and just these books that I had written fueling everything. And so I had my magic case in case I was going to become a street performer and perform magic, and everything worked out. The books just got more and more popular, and then the video courses, and then the masterclass. And so since then, the only place that I've moved to is here, Australia, and I just got rid of everything again. But I never accumulated very much again. And whatever I did accumulate, I gave away, or I pretty much just gave away. Sold very few things. So that was great. And the mail was no problem. I just told them that I wasn't living there anymore. And so I hope that answers your question, Marichello. Kyle says, thank you so much. I feel inspired. Kyle, great. Glad you're inspired. Happy to help. Always happy to help. Amsel says, I sometimes forget images assigned to a station. So is it common, or I'm mistaking somewhere? Yeah, Amsel, I don't know much about your practice, but you could be creating images that do not have all the magnetic modes. You could have memory palaces that are problematic and not as strong as they could or should be. Who knows? You might want to review the fundamentals and take the free course. And sometimes it's good to just quote unquote start from scratch, build your practice from the ground up, analyze everything, and make sure your images have great integrity. And practice. So let me know. I'm just going to look and see if there's any mailbag to go through here. There's always a ton, but got to find a good one here. Oh, right, ham radio. Got an email about ham radio that I want to find. So someone named Hein was asking me about ham radio. Memorizing names for a pastor, but then if he could link to my site from his ham radio site. And I asked him, well, what do you got to remember for ham radio? And he says, the ICAO phonetic alphabet, the frequency ranges of the ham bands, Ohm's law and its derivatives, reactance and frequency, compound symbols, the Q codes, and more. So that sounds very fascinating. So thanks for that. And so, there's so many things that we can use to help us remember information. Maricella says, thanks, I find it difficult to get rid of the papers, mail, and books. You can imagine how I have my kitchen table and my library shelves. Yeah, no, I know it's difficult, but I mean, you gotta pick your battles. And when I did it, I just decided the stuff needed to be gone and just got rid of it. It's kind of a bit brutal in some sense, but it was well worth it. And I'm so practiced at it now with 2 experiences that I probably would be even better the next time. And so really important to just pick your battles, and if you have to do a little can go a long way. So that's great to cleanse one's life. And so much paperwork these days. If you have Evernote or something like that, you can scan it in there, and you don't need to keep the paper. Or you can, think of memorizing what was on those papers, or organizing them in memory journals. Lots and lots of options. but the only paperwork that one needs to keep, usually these days it's quite safe to have them in, maybe emailed to multiple email accounts and have a Google Drive and a Dropbox so you have a backup, and should be fine. But don't take my advice on it. I'm not a data security specialist. Mind you, Brad Zupp has a nice interview on the Magnetic Mary Method podcast where we talk about some of these issues, as do Jonathan Levy and I when we talk about Bitcoin and the blockchain. So there might be some options there for you to explore. Aries asks, just got here wondering if I missed some examples. Yeah, we did most of the examples at the beginning. And one of the things we can play around with is, ideally, you guys come up with your own examples, because mnemonic examples are something that people really, I seem to find that a lot of them get quite addicted to just looking at mnemonic examples instead of getting addicted to creating them. And so penetrating, how does this or that example help me memorize this or that? It's a bit difficult. James Doty, I was just reading his book, Into the Magic Shop. I think that's his name. And he talks about medical mnemonics, and he just said, sometimes he used the pre-given mnemonics, but almost always the better results came from making his own, and that's just universally true about mnemonics. So it's very, very important to create your own. But my hope is that if we are going to have some mnemonics created, we would do like what today, which is the one example per session, unless you guys are supplying detailed information about what you need mnemonic examples for, and even then the examples would be very limited in value because they'd be coming out of my head, whereas the real goal here is to have them coming out of your head. So I gave one today, previous on this stream, and certainly we will do more in the future, but that's not the goal. The goal is for you to create the mnemonic examples. So I hope that I've encouraged some of you to do that. And Amsel's asking me how much time did it take me to memorize. Did I mention 500 books? I don't recall mentioning 500 books. I had over 2,000 books that I mentioned, I'm guessing. And how much time that it takes is a case-by-case basis. But in general, I was using memory techniques from 2003 to 2009 when I got my PhD in 2009. And so how much time it took to, and not all those 2,000 books that I got rid of had necessarily direct relationship to my research. In fact, most of what I memorized, I would guess, was from libraries and books that I never did own, because a lot of those books that I owned were more for reference and research and not necessarily related, although a fair amount of them were. But the question of how much time it took is not really answerable. It was 2003 that I discovered these techniques pretty much in earnest, as I recall, and then I graduated in April of 2009, and I used them, of course, ever since then. But in that period, that was the time that I had to do the PhD, and actually, I guess it might have been 2004 that I started. It was winter anyway. And it would have been that year, the first year of my PhD, because I almost dropped out there. Got in quite a panic. And, it was a long journey just to get there. It was a hard thing to get into my PhD. In any case, it all worked out fine. And, oh man, I read so much, and sitting in front of those committees for those exams, they really grill you. And there's a real real sense of rite of passage that you go through. And I just don't know how I would have done it without having had, it's not just about the memory techniques. It's about the fact that it made me feel so good in the depth of this horrible depression that I had, that no matter how bad I felt, I could read and remember what it was that I thought was most likely to really, really be important for those exams, for writing my dissertation, and just generally for life. And then, having to work with biblical Hebrew was a real challenge, and it was just amazing. I remember Saul, who was my Hebrew tutor, he was saying to me, like, you must have, I don't know, is it because you're a musician that you're able to do this? And I was just like, no, I mean, maybe, but it's like, how do you remember this? And it's I just use these little techniques. I didn't even know nearly enough about them at the time. It wasn't until later, when I was in Germany, that I really, started to think strategically about how they could be applied to language. But I remember that with Saul, and he was just kind of blown away. And I remember it again in Germany with the director of my program. One day I was on the bus, and I hadn't been there that long, and I was just quatching with him in Germany. He's like, what? How did you just got here? And it's just like, blah, 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 quatching. And then I was much more strategic, because I had discovered certain things about how to structure these memory palaces and lay it all out in advance, which these are now principles: preparation and predetermination. And so then the cool thing that would happen is you'd be sitting there watching a movie, you'd just be like, I just learned that word, I just learned that word. You'd be in a cafe. It's like lights coming on all over the place. Absolutely incredible, fantastic experience. And because I was so damn depressed at the time, it constantly helped me feel better. And so I just am driven to share these things, simply because they kept me from the brink of death so many times that you have no idea. And I also, I didn't realize it at the time, that I was just working against myself so much, drinking all the time, eating not well at all, and not taking proper care of myself, and yet working to take care of myself better. But I just, not that smart sometimes. And Germany has a certain drinking culture that is there, and playing in bands and stuff. Glug, glug, glug. So that didn't help the depression at all. Or if it did, it was like only temporary relief. And so it's quite miraculous when you look back through the whole story. And I'm writing that now in my new book, because it has occurred to me that so many people learn from story. And I just heard from somebody, they were telling me, what I like about your book is it's just like so direct and no fluff, and just the technical stuff. And a lot of people just need the information. That's the kind of person I am. I'm trying to work better at story and so forth, but when I read a book about a topic that's about a skill or whatever, it's just like, don't tell me the story, just give me the 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of thing. But I thought I'd give it a try to write a book that's a little more story-based, and show the development of these techniques. And it's getting close to being done. Or not the development of the techniques as such, but how that I came to find them, how that I kept myself from the brink of death. And it's actually pretty hard. When I was writing this morning, I was in tears a little bit, because I was just like, oh my God, do I really want this? Do I really want people to know that it got this bad? But I think it'll make it till the final draft. But yeah, depression is a brutal thing, and because I've survived it, and survive it every day, especially when you got manic depression. It's like you gotta fight 2 battles all the time. I'm just so driven to share these techniques with everybody, because so many people, they're in learned helplessness like you wouldn't believe. and they don't even have these problems. They have other problems, but they don't have these ones. And so I'm pretty confident that if they can just get these chemicals going off in their heads, they'll find a better way. And some of them will even find even better things, because they'll do what I eventually did, which is to start learn about diet and optimizing yourself and taking care of yourself at a higher level. Now I don't drink anymore, and it's like kind of cool that the memory techniques helped me, even though I was a lush about to become a teetotaler. But it's so much better without the booze, for sure, and so much better without all these foods that irritate. But as I talk about in the book, there's all the meditation, all the memory training in the world won't save your skin if you don't take care of certain things, because certainly the storms come one way or the other. So let's check in with the chat here. Oh, J.A. is here. Good to see you, J.A. Everything is well. I hope all is well with you as well. Ari says, that is really cool. I know a guy who had depression and he cured himself by learning, lots of reading. Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing what can happen if you just... This is the thing that we all face at this point in history, is that why is it that when so much information is available to us, we're still suffering? So many people. It's a paradox. It's indescribable. Sophia says, could a memory palace contain other memory palaces, or is that not the best way to learn more memory palaces? I mean, having a master of memory palaces. I know that sounds crazy. It's not crazy at all. Actually, that's the way that some people do it. And if you really think about the magnetic memory method training, I'm asking you to have a master memory palace key. So it's not crazy at all. It totally makes sense. It's just, you've got to be strategic about it and have it directed towards particular outcomes and goals so that it makes sense for the project. And so it wouldn't be a key memory palace that contains all the memory palaces for all things, but rather for one particular thing. So one key per topic. Marichal says, the thing I find very hard is not only studying for a PhD, but dealing with the cold weather plus your depression. I barely deal with winter in Texas. The cold weather is not for me. Jay says, yes, and winter in TO is brutal. Yes, it is. Jay says, I think memory work helps with depression. Some schools of thought believe that cognitions, which can be kept in memory palace, help with depression. Yeah, that's a great point, Jay. And I'm trying to get beyond the belief of it. I'm trying to think about how I can get some studies done, because I think it's really, really important to do more in this. And, you know, it's the same thing. You could just tell, hey, depressed people, we got all this proof that memory training will help you with your depression. And they'll just be like, yeah, whatever, buddy. Because you can't even get not depressed people to do it if they don't want to, right? But it's still worth the try. It's worth an attempt to reach out to people with depression or bipolar disorder. So Ryan's internet adventure, how many German words did you usually sit down to learn on average when you were learning German? I'd say the typical day was 10 to 20. The thing is, Ryan, that once you get into it, once you see how it scales, then it's no longer that sort of numbers game, because you're going to, you know, have phrases as well. And then it starts to scale and compound, and then it no longer sort of becomes a number thing. And you learn too, like the thing is there's all kinds of words I used to use, and people are like abgebaggert and simperlich and so forth. And they just feel like, what the heck are you talking about? It's in the dictionary. And so I had to learn progressively that not all words are made equal just because you can memorize them. And so what ends up happening is, yes, you want to start building this basis, and it really helps if you'll stick to a certain number per day and try to hit certain goals. But then after you start flying and you're in the language, then you start adding what you need when you need it. And you seek out need, right? And you start to read. So I'd read these novels, and then I'd be like, Sigma, I don't know this word. So then I'd go and look it up and memorize that. And I'd go from like reading a novel and going from 10 words or 15 words to just thinking like, you know what? 3 words per page is the new rule. Then it would be like 1 word per page is the new rule, and go from there. So start with a numbers game, but quickly then, as soon as you can, just go into a receptive ability to do it on demand, what you need. And that's just kind of where things are with Chinese now. Like on a day-to-day basis, hanging out with April, she's the only person I really speak Chinese with, sing Chinese songs and so forth. But then it's just kind of like, well, what do I need? What's the highest order thing for the actual context? Because I don't have any particular goals with Chinese anymore. What would it be? Same thing with the Sanskrit project that I'm with now. I'm not learning Sanskrit as such, so daily word vocabulary intake doesn't really matter. What matters is that I'm moving towards the actual goal that I've set. And that's just working with it every day. And I just sipping at it like I teach, study the techniques, implement the techniques, practice them with information that improves your life, SIP, and it's just wonderful. So, you know, start where you're at, figure out the numbers that are going to make the biggest difference, stick with them, and then move into a point where you're then treating it differently, and you have recall rehearsal patterns that can be done differently because you're connecting at a much higher level and integrating with essentially what's called in memory and language learning science memory reserve. The reserve has built up so much. So yes, I talk about the numbers, but those numbers are not meant to be focused on eternally. You should get through it as quickly as possible. And so the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass comes with the MMM vocabulary builder, which is the most likely words that anyone would need. And if you just focus on those at a rate of 5 to 10 per day or whatever, within 3 months, you'll be probably A1 or A2, if not a little bit higher. But that's relative to reading, writing, speaking, and listening as you go along. So that's the key sort of difference. And making sure that you are doing recall rehearsal effectively. All right. Great session today, everybody. Good to see you all. Hope you had a great start to the new year, and I hope we'll see you over at magneticmerrymethod.com in the very near future. Till we have a chance to speak again. Always wonderful, and have a wonderful rest of your week, and talk to you real soon. Keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.